You are listening to audio from The Table. If you'd like to learn more about our community or donate to this ministry, please visit thetabletx.org.
As I mentioned, it's July, so we send Brett off just to enjoy. He works so hard for this community. I'm sure you know, and then whatever you know, add on about 100 times more. And that's how much Brett carries us in his heart, how much he just works and works to make this a community that's living in its values and living towards our mission and our vision. And so it's our joy to be able to send him off, even though we miss him. He gets some rest, and that's a good thing. That's a God thing. And for tonight, we have an extremely special guest speaker who is already a big part of the table. This woman, she carries many plates at the table, if I can use that metaphor. And we couldn't let her go off into the sunset with Brett just yet. We would really love if you spoke and gave the message this week. So Maggie, come on up. Can you guys welcome Maggie up here? This is one of my dear friends, somebody that, even though she is quite a bit younger than me, inspires me, someone who I admire for real. And to know Maggie is to truly feel known and seen and loved. If you've had any sort of interaction with Maggie, she's just genuine to her core, loves Jesus. Thanks, man. And that just flows through her. And so I'm really excited for her to share. I have so much more I could say about you, but we need to hear from you, not me. So you're good with that, Mike?
Yes,
I'll keep this
so.
one, and here's that.
Okay. Thank you, Karen.
However you want it. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, worship team. I feel like the last song did a great job preaching the sermon, honestly, so I'm fine with that. I'm just thrilled anytime I get to stand up here in front of you guys, but I just want you to know that whether you're here online or in person, your presence matters so much to me, and it just is an honor. I just feel beyond privileged to stand here. So, okay. I really love y'all. I really do. And I feel like maybe every message that I ever preach, I always have some sort of warning at the beginning. But guys, if of all the messages that I've ever preached, this one has the biggest warning. Mindy can attest. I have been mulling this one over, and
I know where it's going to go, guys.
we don't. Here's the thing. When I first found out about the opportunity to speak in July, I was really excited because I always look forward to the times that I get to share with you guys. And I immediately, this is probably something you shouldn't confess out loud, but I have no shame here. So I immediately started imagining that I was going to just preach the most powerhouse sermon. You know what I mean? I look small and young, but in my spirit, I am a dragon slayer. In my spirit, I'm just we're just going to talk about all the things that no one wants to talk about on Sundays, and every systemic issue in the world, we're going to tackle it, we're going to nail it, you know what I mean? We're just going to deal with the giants. And I was ready. And that's not the sermon that I'm preaching tonight. Turns out that as I was sitting down to write that powerhouse sermon, I was a little humbled, first of all, by my lack of qualifications to speak to any of the things that I had originally, if you looked at the topics, I'm just all the things, political policy and systemic racism, and I'm just ready to go, and I'm just nope, okay, never mind. But there's this verse in Philippians that also just kept coming to my mind that was sort of a guiding light for me as I wrote it, so it felt wrong to not start there tonight. And if you haven't spent a lot of times in the book of Philippians, I do just really encourage you to go and read it, because it is Paul and Timothy speaking to believers about how to live out their faith. It's just the most practical, hands-on, encouraging, edifying thing. It's so helpful. So, but the verse that was standing out to me actually is about halfway through the book, and it's in the middle of this long monologue that's just riveting and beautiful and inspiring that Paul and Timothy are giving on how believers should work out their salvation. And it's a beautiful thing, but all of a sudden in verse 15 and 16, it's like Paul just pauses, which is funny because he's writing a letter, but it's as if he knows, like, about this time people are going to be getting really uncomfortable. And I think I should just pause and give a little aside. And this is what Philippians 3:15 and 16 says. All of us who are mature should take such a view of things, speaking of everything that he had just laid out. But if on some point you think differently, that too God will make clear to you. Only let us live up to what we have already attained. And it's that last sentence that just kept ringing in my head as I was sitting down trying to figure out, like, what is it of all the things that it's inside of me, what is it that I should speak to on this night? And I couldn't help but think of those words, just live up to what you've already attained, Maggie. Because I'll be honest, all the big dragons that I wanted to slay, I have not attained any of those things. I am like elementary school, preschool level. And what I want to do tonight is I just want to do my best to stay in my lane of what I know to be true in my lived experience and present that to you. So this is going to be the non-impressive, non-trendy, or, hot topic sermon. Instead, it's more like a tale as old as time. And I've titled it, The Reason I'm Still Here. So, several years back, Brett and I bought a house on a property with my twin sister, Mindy, and her husband, Josh. And towards the beginning of living together, we played this game of sorts, sort of like in an effort to get to know each other better and like help each other go below the surface of typical conversation. And this game, you like go through this list of questions, which are strange and most of them extremely awkward. And you pick a question and you pick any individual in the group to ask it to, and they have to answer the question. Now, most of the questions that I remember from that night would not be appropriate to repeat in this particular setting. But as we got further into the game, we decided to go off script a little bit, and we started asking each other just some of our own honest, brave, vulnerable questions, and just directed it and said, like, hey, okay, I'm picking you. I want to ask you this question. And I'll never forget, my brother-in-law, Josh, was at the tail end of like a decade-long, journey of, so silly, it's going to pass. He was at the end of this decade-long journey of deconstruction in his faith and his relationship with God and trying to make sense of all of it. And I think I get emotional because it was such a vulnerable moment. But I remember him looking at me and saying, okay, my question is for Maggie. And I was like, ready? I mean, y'all, we had been talking about ridiculous things. Ridiculous. And all of a sudden, he pulls this out. He goes, Maggie, after growing up as a Christian your whole life and being raised in the church and seeing all the good and the bad and the whole mixture of the whole thing and knowing everything that you know now, why are you still there? Like, what makes you stick around? And I have to say, like, there's this verse in 1 Peter that says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that is in you. And in that moment, I was not prepared. Like, I was extremely caught off guard. And partly because I knew Josh really well. And I knew the deep journey that he had been on and how hard it had been. And I wanted so badly to give this really eloquent response, of like laying out my stance for salvation that would just be riveting and solve all the questions, But I sat there for a minute and I thought about it. And the most honest answer that I could muster is the topic that I want us to talk about tonight. And it is this: the story of Jesus is the one that has taught me to die to myself so that I can live beyond myself. And even if I walked away from it all, that would still be the truth that is saving my life. And I go back to that moment so often because it's interesting to me that the story of Jesus is the story of love incarnate, right? Lived out in front of us. But in particular, it's the story of love through death and resurrection. And I think that we love talking about love, and we love talking about resurrection. We don't love talking about death. We'd rather skip that middle section if possible. And I feel like that, unfortunately, is even true in our churches. And the reason I say that is because we do not have a shortage of churches. Like, I feel like right now you could go in a 5-mile radius and probably see even 2 or 3 new buildings being built as churches. Like in the South where we live in the Bible Belt, there's so many Christians who say that they ascribe to faith in Jesus, but there's so few people who know how to die, so few people who know how to lay down our lives. And unfortunately, I think that's on us. I think sometimes the gospel we're preaching is skipping over the death and resurrection portion. And I remember the first time that this stood out to me was actually when I was a teenager. We grew up in the area. We had this white, big old van with navy blue stripes around, and it had like cool curtains inside. It was really classy. But Mom was driving us down Central Expressway. Yes, Central Expressway, Highway 75, is that the name? Okay. That's why she was driving and not me. But we were driving down Central Expressway, and it was coming up on this big event that was going to be held in our county, really, for See You at the Pole that was coming up soon. And I remember driving past this massive billboard on the side that was new, and I had never seen it before, but it was advertising this big, like, community-wide event where all the youth groups from all these different cities were going to gather together for See You at the Pole, and, you know what I mean, kind of like renew their faith in Christ type thing. And the billboard, I remember, was just pure white background, and it had these huge, bold-faced lettering on it, and this is what it said: "Stand up for Jesus," and then the time and the place written at the bottom. And it occurred to me in that moment, what a contradiction of messaging that billboard was from the actual call of Jesus. And I thought to myself, how odd that a religion formed around someone who came to lay down his life sacrificially and die on a cross is now, like, his pinnacle moment of ministry, was crucifixion. And this same leader that we're following now, we're encouraging our young people that the best way to follow him is to stand up for Jesus. Take a stand. And as if he, needs us to defend him in some way. And it hit me then, wait a minute, isn't that the exact opposite of what Jesus said? I'm going to read it because in Matthew 16:24, I'm afraid I'll misquote it for you, but just to give us an example, and I feel like there's a ton of scriptures that we could pick from, but specifically Matthew 16:24, Jesus says to his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. If anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." And I thought, wow, we're taking this call of sacrifice and surrender and twisting it into something that's stand up and defend. That's a totally different posturing. That's a totally different call. And unfortunately, a lot of times our churches are right at the front of that charge. And that concerns me. But at the same time, it doesn't surprise me because this is the way of all of us. This is the way of humanity. This is how we work as human beings. Basic survival skills, right? And honestly, even if you look at the story of Jesus in the Bible, when he's in the garden and the mob comes to arrest him and take him to trial, his own disciple, Peter, he had his own stand up for Jesus moment, right? The mob's coming, and they're going to arrest Jesus, And what does Peter do? Pulls out a sword, slashes the guy's ear off, one of the guards' ears off, and, is ready to take a stand for Jesus. He's ready to defend, because that's what we do. We don't like the dying part of salvation. We just like the living, the staying alive part. And Peter was doing what any of us would do, right? That's just human nature. But what does Jesus do? He goes over, picks up the guy's ear, puts it back on the side of his head, looks at Peter and rebukes him. Peter, this is not the way that love's going to overcome evil. This is not the way the will of God is going to come through violence. Jesus is always teaching this countercultural way of denial of self. And what does he do in that moment? He just surrenders. He just lets them drag him off and goes to his trial. Because, here's the secret, Jesus is not concerned with staying alive. He's concerned with being fully alive. And that's a totally different posturing. He's not trying to save his life, his own life. And he's teaching us to do the same. He's setting that model for us, that if you really want to live, if you really want to experience life of the ages, it's more than just staying alive. And I think that's why, if you read John 10:10, he says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that they may have life and have it to the full, life abundantly. He's saying, I want you to do more than just stay alive. This is more than just blood and oxygen. This is about life to the full. And the dichotomy of it all is that if you look at the life of Jesus, that involves a certain death. That involves a certain dying. And when I say death or dying, I'm not talking about physical death here. Although I think Jesus' life has implications for our physical death. But I think what he's talking about in those scriptures is not just what happens to us after we die physically. He's talking about dying to ourselves, to our tendencies for self-protection and self-promotion and self-defense. And in the end, it becomes kind of self-obsession, right? Because here's the thing. No matter what kind of upbringing you had or how healthy or unhealthy your family of origin was, whether you grew up rich or poor, Christian, non-Christian, other, the common denominator between all of us are these tendencies for self-protection and self-defense and survival, right? These are things that were really helpful for us when we were young. We needed them as babies, right? This is how they survive. When something's wrong, if they're hurting or if they're hungry, they're going to yell out. They're going to cry and let you know about it, And when kids are on the playground and they're like developing social skills and trying to figure out how to make their way in the world, there's a lot of that happening, those survival instincts that are kicking in, you know what I mean? Like I've got boys right now who, we are in the thick of survival instincts. Whoa. Yeah, Jesse knows. Survival of the fittest, and I don't know who's going to win right now. I don't know. But these are the things that we all, need to do to develop our sense of self when we're young. But it occurs to me that the same survival skills that we learn as young kids to help us survive are some of the same skills that we need to unlearn as adults to help us live. We can't keep repeating those same things that were appropriate for a baby, but we're adults now and we have to mature out of that if we really want to live. And that's where the message of Jesus, I feel like, is so hopeful. Almost every song that I've ever written talks about some sort of dying, and I just love them all. I love them. I think it's just the most beautiful thing. But it's because I know the power inside of it sets me free. And I need someone to help me die to myself, because the truth is, none of us were meant to be an end in ourselves. And when we adopt those patterns and the self-obsession, actually, in truth, it will kill us. it will kill us because we weren't made to live that way. No human being was. There's a verse. Okay, Eileen, I'm sorry. Y'all, we all love you, Eileen. I'm so sorry. Which one is it, Eileen, that says, because I got a little ahead of myself, perhaps. Is it Philippians 2:5? Let's see. Where it talks about, y'all, I started to print this message out. It was over 7 pages front and back. I said, forget it. We're just going to trust the Spirit. Let's just go with Philippians 2:5 for now. Let's do it. It's going to apply. It's going to work. That wasn't the one I was thinking of, but it's going to be good. Okay, are you ready? Philippians 2:5. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. In the Bible, it says that Jesus came to show us the way to the Father. And the Maggie version of that is Jesus came to reconnect us with the love of God and all that is holy. And I think all of us are on that quest in life, right? I mean, I feel like even non-believers are on that quest. We're all trying to figure out how to get back to what is holy. How do I reconnect with the love of God? And if Jesus came to show us the way to the Father, then when we look at his life, we can see, oh, that's how we get there. So when we ask ourselves, like, how do I get back my sense of peace? How do I get back to that sense of love? I think the example that Christ left us is being in very nature with God. He did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. And he's teaching us how to let go. And I think the human tendency is instead to grasp, right? Like that is our tendency, is to hold on to things so tightly. And for me, I think there's two different, at least tonight, the language I want to use is there's two different postures that we can take in the world. We can take the posture of survival, which is just grasping onto anything that gives us identity, grasping onto anything that gives us purpose and value. Or we can take the way of surrender, which is what I see Jesus doing on the cross, where instead of grasping onto anything that gives us purpose and value, instead of holding tightly to those things, we let go of them and we let God hold tightly to us. And when I was thinking about, like, Maggie, what are you saying when you're talking about death? What does that mean to die to yourself? The definition I was using was dying to anything that would define me apart from the love of Christ. Letting go of anything that says who I am or how much value I have apart from the love of Christ. And when Jesus died on the cross, the reason he could choose surrender is because he knew the most valuable thing, the most true thing about him couldn't be killed. The most true thing about him was he was the beloved of Christ. This is my son in whom I am well pleased. And you can nail me to the cross and it's not going to change that. And so as human beings, we can lose everything and it's not going to change that we're the beloved of God. We're the child of God and nothing can take that away. And the life of a believer, I feel like, is practicing that truth over and over and over again. Because here's the thing, whether we're choosing death in a spiritual way or whether it happens to us, death keeps coming. It keeps coming in all of its different forms. It could be like the loss of a dream, or the loss of a job, or the loss of a marriage, or the loss of people's good opinion of you. And these things kill us. But if we can enter in to death and resurrection in those moments and tell ourselves, like, what if, okay, this is something I probably shouldn't say, but just to put flesh on this. Oh gosh, it's 5:50. Okay, this is. When Brett and I started the table, that was an extremely vulnerable process. And because it was so vulnerable, it was very easy to feel this need for it to thrive. This need, like it needs to be something so that we don't look stupid in the end. You know what I mean? Like, please, table, thrive. And I told Brett one day on a walk, we were talking about like just confessing out loud our fears, which honestly, I just encourage all of us. If you want to practice death and resurrection, just start saying your fears out loud. Start confessing them out loud to the people closest to you and to God. Just say them. Sometimes, I'm just getting ready in the morning and I realize I'm in that anxious space and I'm spinning with anxiety. And I literally have learned to just stop and say, Maggie, say exactly what you're afraid of right now. Just say it. Because it loses its power suddenly. And I, most of the time, look at it and just laugh. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Maggie, just stop. Okay, what are you? But when we started the table, it was, you know what I mean? Like it just felt like this pressure to like make sure you did the right thing. So I hope this thing really works because otherwise it's going to be obvious that you did the wrong thing to everyone. And we were on this walk and Brett and I were just confessing our fears. And, and we were laughing because it was just stupid, the things that we would say. But I told Brett, I said, you know what my favorite thing to do is right now? And he was like, okay, what? And I was like, I just like to imagine that it doesn't work. And he was like, what? And I was like, that the table dies. What if the table dies? And I really kind of had to apologize. I kind of hurt his feelings. But he was just like, what are you saying? What are you saying? And I was just like, no, I just mean I want to face the worst case scenario so that I can remember the truth. Because you know what? If the table dies, I still love you and you still love me and we're going to be fine. If the table dies, I'm going to keep on doing the same thing I've been doing. I'm going to live out the gospel in whatever form people will allow me to do that. I'm just going to keep on doing it. When we allow ourselves to surrender to death and resurrection, there is this power because whatever it is that we're afraid of, it actually gets to be seen up juxtaposed against what is actually true, And if you face the worst case scenario, even then, you're left with one thing that will never go away. You are the beloved of God. That is the story of Jesus. You can't kill it. It doesn't go away. So welcome it. Invite it. Surrender to it. Open up. Let it take its way in you in day after day, moment after moment. Every time I'm in a conflict with a friend, I tell myself, death and resurrection, Maggie, death and resurrection. Do not let your ego get in the way. This is just, it applies to every situation that we're in. Just allow it to die in front of you and let God resurrect it into something that's real, something that can't be killed. So, because I have gone over time, I'm going to stop there. I am going to ask Will if he will come and read our Celtic invitation to the table. While he does that, I did have a song that I wrote around this topic that it felt like too specific to what we're talking about tonight to not share it. So while you guys are taking communion, I'm just going to be singing that in the background. And then the worship team will come up and close us in a song. But Will, if you don't mind coming and giving the invitation to the table, that would be awesome. Thank you.
This is the table, not of the church, but of the Lord. It is made ready for those who love him and for those who want to love him more. You who have much faith and you who have little. You who have been here often and you who have not been here long. You who have tried to follow and You who have failed, come, because it is the Lord who invites you. It is his will that those who want him should meet him here. Come to the table.
You put a seed into the ground. You let it die and watch it drown. But what is lost will become found. After the rains have fallen down, there was a man who walked the earth. Said he would give a second birth. He always preached the way to life. And then he spread his arms to die. And I'm trying to learn how to die. And I'm wanting to stop living to survive. And I'm hoping that this death gives way to life. As I'm giving of myself, I pay the price to live. So 'neath the soil I find myself. Within the breaking of this shell. And the identities I've known. All give It